All right, guys. Well, thank you very much for taking time to listen to this great panel. As Dave was saying, a lot of the folks who do work on Capitol Hill on the staff level are really the ones driving crypto policy on the Hill. I mean, it's a very complex topic and it requires a lot of folks to take time to understand these really complicated issues and break it down for members of Congress in a way that they can understand, especially when it comes to just how complex a lot of this regulation is. So I'd love to start with Francesco here, just to introduce yourself, who you work for, and then we'll go into the meat of the topics here.
Hey, thanks, Ron, and thanks to the Blockchain Association for having us all. We love getting out and talking and meeting with everybody and kind of just giving a rundown of what's going on. Since we're in DC and we love to give disclosures about everything, everything I say is my own thoughts and does not necessarily express the views of my boss. But with that said, I'm the Senior Policy Advisor for Congressman Budd. He serves on the House Financial Services Committee, and as Dave just graciously said, he did just win his Senate election in North Carolina. So proud and very happy for him, and look at the work we can do going forward.
Hi, everybody. Emily Gurman. I'm the Subcommittee Staff Director for House Ag Subcommittee on Commodity Exchanges, Energy, and Credit. Just so everybody knows, the House Ag, yes, does have jurisdiction over the Commodities Futures Trading Commission. So that's the story of why I'm here and why Ag is represented. I will give the same disclaimer. Views are my own, not necessarily on behalf of the committee members, chairman, or any of the members on the committee. So.
And likewise, I echo that.
Is that me, bud?
Likewise, I echo that. These are my own thoughts, and I'm Tim Hite. I serve as counsel to Congressman Warren Davidson. He serves on the Financial Service Committee, and yeah, looking forward to a good conversation.
Hey guys, Rashan, Colbert. I work in Senator Cory Booker's office. He sits on the Senate Agriculture Committee, so some of the same issues. I lead his work on technology, telecommunications, and a lot of crypto stuff. But thanks, Ron, for doing this. Thanks, Blockchain Association. And thanks, Dave, for that extremely generous intro at the beginning there.
Gotta love it. Well, let's go into the topic that everyone's talking about right now. It's FTX. Some pretty big news was announced just a couple hours ago about a hearing happening in House Financial Services Committee, likely in December. But a lot of these staffers here probably met with SPF or at least met with FTX in some shape or form. But from y'all's perspective, I'd love to get your reaction, and maybe we can start with Emily, since you were dealing a lot with on the House Ag, and then Rashan, I'd love to hear from you from Senate Ag perspective. But what's your view on the FTX situation from an Agriculture Committee perspective, and then love to get to Tim and Francesco afterwards.
So, I think the biggest thing that I want to address up top is CFTC's role in all of this. It's been something that has been a little bit obfuscated in the press that I've seen in the last couple of days. So, CFTC, the CFTC registered entity that was under FTX US is LedgerX. LedgerX is still one of the few that it's not in bankruptcy. It is still operational. As of yesterday afternoon, at the very least, last time I talked to CFTC. So that's the biggest thing that I really want to address at the top is CFTC's role in this. FTX US, as we know, is in some difficulty. That is, the spot market, which we'll talk about a little bit later about different legislative ideas that came about in order to address the regulatory oversight that is the crypto spot market. But that would be my initial reactions. So,
Rashan, what about you from a Senate Ag perspective? I know that since there was a lot of talk about the DCCPA, but just Senate Ag in general getting engaged in these issues. What's your first thoughts on the FTX situation, especially now? Where the Ag Committee is going to go after this?
Yeah, first thoughts are myriad, and I don't think we'd have enough time to really talk about everything here in this panel. But I think it's once I start thinking a bit more about work and the substance. I think the things that the committee has been working on, DCCPA and others, are going to continue on. They're not perfect piece of legislation. That's been the whole thing, is tailoring it, getting the feedback, making it better and better as things have gone on. I think also there's a chance to separate a bit the rhetoric from the reality here. Have FTX and Sam himself have definitely been very vocal people, giving lots of input and comments, but that hasn't resulted in quite the hand on the pen that I think some people might think it has.
Gotcha. Well, speaking of the hearing that's happening, Tim, Francesco, y'all are going to be on that committee for House Financial Services, likely when it comes to the bombastic hearing, which will be potentially SPF. We don't know who's going to be testifying at that hearing just yet, since it was just announced a couple hours ago. But gut reaction, Francesco and Tim, what are you and your colleagues thinking right now of the FTX situation? given the financial services perspective of this?
I think it was inevitable that there would be a hearing. Like everyone here, I'm very curious to see who shows up for that hearing and see what comes out as the weeks go by. I mean, it seems like we're checking Twitter by the hour and learning some new stuff. But I thought GameStop would be the biggest hearing of this Congress, but I think this one might beat it.
Maxine's no stranger to fanfare for hearings, so that's definitely the case. Francesco, what about you? What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think there was no way that we weren't going to address this, at least this Congress. I would fully expect us to have additional more hearings on this, even into the next Congress. We all know potentially future Chairman McHenry. Are we at 218 yet, Republican?
I think we've gotten there yet.
Obviously, McHenry has a huge interest in this, so I would expect even additional hearings going on to the next Congress on these issues. But I think there was no way that we weren't going to address FTX, at least in some form, this Congress. I mean, we were all kind of looking at us and trying to figure out if we were going to have hearings on 3 Hours Capital and Celsius when all that was going on. But I guess this was big enough of a headline for mainstream people to pay attention to. Our biggest thing right now is, as Tim also said, is who's going to come. We have no idea who's going to testify. Trying to figure that out. The chairwoman does have subpoena authority, so that's something to keep in mind. But very eager to see where this goes and what results from it.
So, Rashan, you said that this likely won't be the last hearing that we have coming up on this topic, and it's something that probably will be in 2023. There's a lot of folks talking about 2023 being a really pivotal year for not only for crypto hearings, but crypto legislation. At least from the Senate perspective and your boss's perspective, what do you think is going to happen in 2023, especially with the gridlock Congress, when a lot of stuff usually doesn't get done? What are you thinking?
Yeah, I think fortunately this is an issue that has, as we've discussed, really significant bipartisan agreement that something needs to be done. So, Debbie Stabenow will maintain the chair of the committee. So I think she's serious about moving forward with this legislation in whatever form that might take. So I think at least for right now, as many of you know, there was supposed to be a hearing this week, but events have made that not the best reality. So just taking a pause, seeing what lessons there are to be learned. But I think a lot of the things in the bill were attempting to address a lot of the things that we saw happen with FTX. So there's definitely still energy to keep moving forward, but just to take the lessons, sit back for a second and try and take it all in.
Speaking of lessons, that's a great topic. Emily, at least on the committee, you deal with a lot of these issues firsthand, especially being, with the chairman. And what's your thoughts on looking back at the lobbying efforts, either with FTX or the crypto industry as a whole? And what would your advice be or criticism of currently, the educational efforts on Capitol Hill, especially with committee staff who are very instrumental in writing legislation for 2023 and this year?
I mean, as far as educational efforts, I think the thing that's been the most helpful is just repetition. I mean, that's usually the simplest way to go about things. Just to expand a little bit further, we did have our hearing in the past year with FTX on their proposal that was before CFTC for clearing their clearing proposal. That's since been withdrawn, but it was an interesting dynamic to have one of the few hearings that was more critical of SBF and the way that they were going. I think that this whole thing has provided us just another case study, like Rashad said, to be able to take a look at what the heck happened and how we can prevent it or address it in future legislation. We've already got a fantastic framework thanks to Senator Stabenow and Senator Bozeman. There's also the Digital Commodity Exchange Act as well. There's a lot of ideas out there. Ag has been pretty active in this space, and I think that will continue moving forward. We have the ripple of the fact that next year the Farm Bill has to get done as well, which for any of you that don't know, it's the major bill that the Ag Committee does every 4 or 5 years. So it typically takes up all of the oxygen in the room. So it's going to be a balancing act for sure. But I know that we have some fantastic staffers on the House and the Senate side that are focused solely on the CFTC side of things. So we'll be able to continue that effort next year through the Farm Bill.
Tim, I'd love to get your thoughts, moving to the financial services and Senate banking side of things. There have been several hearings in financial services as well on this issue. We've had SBF, we had some pretty big crypto CEO hearings in the past. And now we potentially have Chair McHenry coming to the fray here, and he said that one of his top 3 issues is crypto, most notably stablecoin and market structure regulation. What do you think is going to happen in 2023 with McHenry potentially at the helm in the House?
Just speaking for myself, I don't think what has developed in the last few weeks has really changed that trajectory. I think you're going to see Chair McHenry really continue to push. This will probably just reemphasize the need for what he's been pushing for all along. And I think stablecoins are obviously still the low-hanging fruit. I think they're the ones that you can get through on a bipartisan basis. And we look forward to working with him, with our Democrat counterparts, with the Senate, and getting that done.
That's awesome. Well, I want to focus also on the member priorities that each of your bosses are leading right now. And again, a lot of these issues that happen legislatively, it all starts with the folks here who are writing the legislation, who are taking stakeholder meetings, who are meeting with folks in the industry and elsewhere to get their opinion on things. So Francesco, I want to focus on you first because your boss has been really big on DeFi. And so especially recently with DCCPA and a lot of the market developments, DeFi has gotten a lot of attention recently that really didn't have, at least in DC, the past year or so. So, what are you seeing, at least right now, from Senator-elect Bud, as well as what do you think is going to happen probably before 2023?
Thanks, Ron. That's been a major focus for our office and the Congressman. That's been an issue that we've been following way before the conversation around DCCPA picked up. I would say that one of the biggest hurdles that we've seen, at least in DC and maybe just publicly, is the battle that we constantly have between what is CeFi and what's DeFi, and kind of making sure people understand the differences. Even when the FTX issue happened, people were blaming DeFi for this, and that was like, oh, here we go. So that's been a hurdle, right? But internally, we've been trying to address these issues and creating a framework. The goal is to essentially create a framework that makes sense, that is actually focused on DeFi, does not have is not mixed up on anything, and makes it clear what we can do, right? We want to see DeFi prosper. We think it's a great tool going forward. We see it as a massive disruptor. Even centralized traditional financial institutions look at it and are like, okay, there's something here to work with. So we want to create a framework right there that's going to continue building that up. So that's a goal for us internally. That's something we've had a lot of conversations. Marilyn Whitehouse from DeFi Education Fund has been fantastic to help work on these things and just kind of spitball and throw things off the wall. And I honestly have to say everybody else in the DeFi community has been extremely helpful too. So, the one thing, if there's an ask in this, is please come help talk with us and work with us as we're doing this. I know there's a lot of disagreements on certain things, but that's the point. We want to basically get to a point where we can get a piece of legislation or framework, regulatory consensus that we can live with, that makes sense and is not going to be marred by some controversy that we see in some other bills.
So, Rashan, on these points, it's such a complex topic, especially in the DeFi space, but especially just DCCPA regulation to begin with. What have you seen that's worked on the advocacy level from folks in the industry, but also consumer groups and regulators and others? And as well as, what are you seeing for your boss's priorities for 2023, given his Senate Ag Committee jurisdiction?
Yeah, so on the advocacy question, that's a really good one because obviously this is complicated stuff, right? And so I think for any person, they're continually learning. Right? Whether you're an expert or something brand new, you're going to keep trying to learn and figure out what you can. But the way that legislators are coming at these issues, sometimes they're really interested. Maybe they'll get to go building block by building block and learn the foundation and bit by bit learn everything put together. But they're coming at it from a problems first perspective. So where the rubber really meets the road, where usually bad things happen, that's when it gets put on their desk. And so having the ability to bring a few different things together, a few different components of the technology stack and the finance all together and say, we see this problem, but this will ameliorate it. Whether it's DeFi, these are the characteristics of this technology that can actually prevent these types of problems that we're seeing, et cetera, et cetera. For perspectives, I think, or for priorities. I think Senator Booker wants to make this a space where people who want to participate can. And so how can the average person participate within the larger crypto ecosystem safely? Is that through incentivizing behavior that we think is safe? Is that through disclosures and transparency? Is that through regulation? Is that through education? So trying to figure out what balance of all those things actually helps the average person, the person who he's looking out after in New Jersey, participate safely.
I'd love to build on that, the education, the repetition. Emily, you mentioned the repetition, and that's what's necessary for members of Congress and staff to get familiar with these issues, but also just understanding what happened. I think it's really nice to see from Congress, not to be as reactionary, but more of like, let's find out what happened before we start actually writing some legislation in the space, as at least we're seeing with House Financial Services and the FTX hearing. So Emily, when you're going to hearings and making some plans here, what approach do you take in terms of trying to have a holistic view of what's happening, as well as best ways to have members engage on this topic who may not be as familiar with what cryptocurrency is on the House Ag Committee?
At a certain point in time, I think it would be helpful to move past hearings where we're just focusing on what are the use cases and why is this important, and really the topic at hand that we as legislators need to address is the regulatory aspect of things. So, and to oddly enough, I think that that's something that's maybe more familiar and that members are maybe able to grasp a little bit more is, what happens from the regulatory perspective. The conversations about, use cases are great and great background information, but I think we need to have those things separated just a little bit. And I'm actually pretty optimistic that the conversations about regulation are going to be almost simpler than, the conversations and the education about, why the heck we're talking about this in the first place and who uses it and what is it used for. We've done a lot of great work on that side of things, and I'm really interested in, seeing it in the next Congress if we can really move the needle. So does that cover it?
Oh, exactly. No, it's fantastic. Tim, I'm going to come back to you here because, talk about someone who's spent the time to learn this issue. It's, Representative Warren Davidson. Full disclosure, I used to work for him, used to be at Tim's spot, so know fully well. But Warren Davidson's always been, on the cutting edge, at least in terms of crypto policy. It was securities law first, but now it looks like you're moving to, other issues. What are you looking at in terms of priorities for you and Representative Davidson, as well as what do you think is going to happen with the priorities going forward for 2023?
Yeah, one thing we've been prioritizing this year, and I think the importance of this has only grown as the year's gone on, is the idea of self-custody and protecting those off-ramps where you can transfer your digital assets to a cold storage wallet. I think FTX really exemplifies the need, why there has to be that ability to not rely on an exchange to custody your own assets. So, my boss came out with the Keep Your Coins Act, KYC, a little play on Know Your Customer. I was proud of that one.
That was a good one.
So, a lot of people will say, oh, what are the implications of that? Could it be dangerous? Well, no, as long as there's still the on-ramps and off-ramps through the exchanges. There's still a regulatory BSA AML regime that's applied to the exchanges. However, from a consumer standpoint, I could want to go to exchange, transfer my fiat into a digital asset. After that, there's an inherent right there to transfer that to a cold storage wallet, and that's something my boss is passionate about. We're looking forward to continuing to push that message.
Awesome. Well, in the last couple minutes here, guys, I want to kind of get your hot takes here, or at least your views of what the industry could do better when it comes to crypto and advocacy in DC, as well as any other hot takes you guys think is going to happen for 2023. Happy to start, Francesco, and move it down the line here, or feel free to weigh in if you feel appropriate. So, Frank, I'll start with you, though. Is there any advice you would have for the industry, or any hot takes you would have for 2023 legislation for crypto?
Advice. Keep doing what you're doing, right? I've actually been hearing a lot from folks that are worried about what's going on right now with the environment, the economic implications of what's happening. And they've asked, should we kind of just be quiet? Should we just kind of slink back into the shadows and just let things simmer down? And I couldn't disagree with that more. I think, hey, right now is when you're on the defense. Like, you are going to have to be out there full warrior mode, just pushing against what we're seeing, putting together great policy takes and perspectives on how we can work to mitigate any issues like this going forward. Obviously, FTX is unique since they are based in the Bahamas and not the U.S. And there's some things we've discussed internally that we know, why we're encouraging adoption within the U.S. And there's a clear regulatory framework here. Well, there's not, but we want to continue ones. But getting people to adopt and build in the U.S. is going to give you more consumer protections versus not. So keep getting out there, keep educating. Like everybody's talked about, education is key. Getting in front of members, talking about, and staffers, and telling us what we can and can't do or what needs to be done. That's huge. I want to see that continue. I do not want to see people saying, no, we're going to just kind of lay back and see what happens. Hot takes, I think stablecoin probably is the first bill that gets done before anything else. That's kind of, I guess, the hottest take I have. We'll see where that goes. That's about it. I think we're taking things day by day.
We really are at this point, hour by hour, right now. Emily, what about you? What are your thoughts on that?
My biggest piece of advice would just be to, if you're coming to the Hill to talk to folks, send your technical people, send your engineers. Yes, the translation might be difficult, but that's the information that we need. So I think that would be my biggest advice. As far as hot takes go, I think it's if I can just, one more time put it out there that, CFTC's involvement in this whole FTX thing, just because that's not been the way that I've seen a lot of the information in the industry, or, the information that's been swirling around over the last couple of days. There's been some confusion, I think, as far as, what CFTC's role is in things. So I'll just leave it there.
I echo that when you say bring the tech people in. I think that's the translation may be difficult, but it is valuable. What else? With everything that's gone on, I think people may be looking to say, oh, who's going to be the next voice in Washington now that all this is unfolded? But really, I think it's more of a collective effort. Don't, coalesce around one voice. That's going to be key going forward, I think. Just continuing what you're doing with the education at the member level. And yeah, we look forward to hearing from you.
Sean, final thoughts?
Advice-wise, bring the technical folks and have a sort of a problems-first mindset. People are going to be reading in the news, address the thing in the news and say, this is how we're thinking about it. People can respond to that. Hot takes, nothing too hot. This stuff is, it goes slow, but stay involved because it happens all at once when it's time, so.
All right, well, guys, give this great panel who's been so helpful for all the legislation. Thanks again, guys. Really do appreciate it.